Thinking of setting up a budget but not sure what to do first? I'll show you the best place to get started. Welcome back to Ready Budget Go. My name is Drew, and on this channel we talk about cash budgeting, saving money, and achieving our financial goals. If that sounds like something you're interested in, please consider subscribing, hitting the like button, and leaving a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you. Today, what I want to talk about is the first step in the budgeting process. I think a lot of people, when they decide they want to start budgeting, or when they come to the realization that they really do need to put themselves on a budget, they put together the budget first and they put in numbers that sound good or what they think things will cost them. And then they get to the end of the month and the numbers that they actually spent are nothing like what they planned, and they give up. So before doing a budget, I think it's really important to do a spending analysis. And what a spending analysis is, it's a look back over the past several months or maybe even a year of spending to see what you actually spent. This is money that's already out of your account. You already spent it. And so it's seeing where that money went, and was that money well spent, or are there places where you could have spent less or directed that money to other purposes? So I'll walk you through a sample spending analysis using some real numbers from what I spent. The difference is that my spending analysis for this video will come from spending that I already did after I had started planning my spending. So the numbers are high, but I had already planned to spend that amount of money. When I did my spending analysis, I did it back in April, and I used 6 months prior to that. So we're talking like October, November, December, January, February, March. So October of 2023 through March of 2024. And I don't have those trackers anymore. And in fact, it was before I developed these. But I will show you what my spending looks like since May of this year, at least for a few months, just so you can get an idea of what a spending analysis will look like and some of the surprises that I found along the way. So this is the first month of the spending analysis that I did for the purposes of this video. And these are real numbers from my bank account and my credit cards from May of 2024. It includes everything from my rent to trips to the fast food joint to subscriptions, everything that I spent out of my account. Now, I did not count things twice. So in other words, if I spent money on a credit card, I didn't count that transaction and then count my payment toward the credit card, because I'm only paying for that once. If you are carrying a balance on your credit card and you're making debt repayment, then you want to include those payments, because that's not just new transactions, that is paying down the debt that you already have. I don't revolve balances, so I don't count any of those payments here. So month one in May was a really heavy spend month for me. And the reason why was because I made 4 different trips that month. So I went to Portland, I went to Los Angeles, I went to the Midwest, and I went somewhere else. But at any rate, I wrote down all of the money that I spent in all those different places. One of the things that may shock you when you do a spending analysis is that you will have so many transactions that they actually don't fit on whatever pages you're using, whether you're using my trackers or analysis worksheets or somebody else's, or if you're just writing it out on a lined piece of paper. You may end up filling several pages. In fact, this isn't even all of the transactions. I started combining them here toward the end because I didn't want to go on to another spread. So the numbers are accurate. The number of transactions is truncated. And so most of this spending is discretionary. One of the things that I did after I wrote down all the transactions is I went back through and I categorized which were required spends and which were not. So if they have a Y next to them, it's money that I had to spend. So I count things like my Roth contribution as required spend. I want to be able to retire someday, so for me, those are mandatory. It wasn't necessarily mandatory that I spend the money in this month, but I want to be sure that I'm maxing out my Roth IRA for the year. But things like rent, that's mandatory. Emergency savings, I also count that as mandatory. Here's my renter's insurance, mandatory. Down here is transit passes, so those are mandatory. Things like that. Anything else that is pure fun or is money that I didn't have to spend, I marked with a no, and then I went through and highlighted. So these are things like travel, restaurant meals, souvenirs when I was out and about, Etsy spending, eBay spending, anything like that. All of that is a discretionary expense. And I categorize those as such so that when I'm going through after I've written down everything and I'm thinking, wow, I spent over $7,000 this month, I got to make some cutbacks to fit into what I actually brought home. I know where I need to start looking to pull that number down because I'm not going to cut my fixed expenses unless I absolutely have to, or my mandatory expenses. There's not a whole lot that I can do about my rent payment. But could I have skipped, let's see, what's one I could have skipped? Could I have skipped $36 at the candy store? Yeah, I could have skipped that. But again, for me, I had already planned on spending this money. So even though it's significantly more than what I brought in that month, I had already built up the savings or the stockpile or the sinking fund so that I wouldn't have to go into debt. And when the bills came in, I could just pay them all off. So that was month one. And then we'll look at month two, and I'll tell you what happened in month two and why I say there's no such thing as a typical month. So here's month two. And as you can see from the amount of highlighting on this page, it's basically colored paper. If I were highlighting all the way across, the pages would warp because they would be so wet with ink. And the reason is because when I was traveling on one of the trips that I made, I brought home a really nasty virus. And yes, that virus. And it took me weeks to shake it. In fact, I didn't really start feeling 100% better until sometime around the middle of September. So in the meantime, when I got back, I didn't have any energy. I couldn't really go anywhere or do anything. So I was getting a lot of food delivery in there because I just couldn't even make it to the grocery store. I was barely leaving my apartment. The only reason why I would leave the apartment is to go to the doctor or the pharmacy. Anything else I just had delivered, stayed in bed a lot, slept a lot. And so there's a lot of discretionary spending in here. And again, the month came in higher than I would have expected. So it came in at $44.95, which is a lot. It could have been higher, but I had also planned on part of the money from this month going into paying off the bills from the month prior. So that was part of the plan all along. Also, with the spending that I did, it took the place of some of the other things that I had planned on spending money on. So, for example, I didn't do any real entertainment spending this month. I didn't really engage with any of my hobbies. I didn't do any. Well, I didn't go to the grocery store, so my grocery budget just went to take out food. So it worked out about the same. It's just not what I really would have wanted to spend my money on. So again, it's not a typical month. I don't plan on getting sick every single month, but May wasn't a typical month either because I don't plan on traveling 4 times a month. So when I say there's never a typical month, there's always something that comes up. There's always something about that month that is unique to that month, that is a black swan. It's a one-time thing, or it comes up once in a blue moon and it just happened to hit that month. And so it's easy to say, well, it's not a typical month and we're going to exclude that. But if you exclude all the one-time things and you put a budget together based on your best case spending, then you miss out on all of those expenses, and you don't plan for them. And when they happen, they hurt because now it blows your budget out of the water, and then you give up on the budget. So I put in everything, no matter how frivolous it was or how unique it was. It once in a lifetime thing. It went into the spending analysis. And so I'll show you one more month, and then we'll skip ahead to month 6, where I kind of would say it's a more typical month. There are fewer black swan events. So here's month 3. I won't dwell on this too much. $4,400, still a lot of spending that I wasn't planning on, a lot of discretionary spending. Some of this was just catching up, making up for lost time. I went to the barber because I couldn't stand it anymore. I was still going to the pharmacy quite a bit, so there's quite a few transactions in here for Walgreens and Rite Aid and whatnot. So still a lot of discretionary spend, but overall, this is where things started to kind of get back on track. So I won't spend too much time in this month. We'll skip ahead to October, which would have been month 6 had I been doing this spending analysis, looking back 6 months from when I'm filming this video in the middle of November. And I'll show you what October looked like. And that's what I would say is more typical for me, but I still want to include outliers. So here's month 6, and there was $5,900 in spending this month. And I know I said this is more typical. There are outliers in here, but I would say these are less uncommon outliers. So the two things that made this budget so much bigger, or this month of spending so much bigger than the last 2 months we looked at, were I made another $1,000 contribution to my Roth, and I also spent about $500 on shoes and clothes. I buy shoes and clothes typically once or twice a year, and I tend to get a lot in one go. So spending $150, $200 on clothes is not unusual for me, but I only do it a couple of times a year. This time I needed shoes, and I've got enough shoes now to last me probably at least another 9 months to a year. I'm really hard on my shoes. I walk a lot, so they tend not to last very long. But having several pairs now ensures that I won't have to come out of pocket as a surprise in the future when my last good pair of shoes decides that they want to give up the ghost. So a high spend month, but I would say this is more typical with more typical outliers. The number of discretionary transactions is about what I would expect. There was quite a rash of them here at the end of the month just because I had a really busy week at work. So I was hitting the drive-through or the fast food joint a lot more than I should. But all in all, a typical spend month. So that was my spending analysis. And then if I were doing this from scratch, what I would then do is put all of the numbers together and say, okay, what is my average spend over these 6 months? And where do I want my money to go? So I'm going to bring you over to my monthly budget overview, which I put together for November. If you've been watching my videos, then you've already seen this a couple times, and we'll talk about how I got to those numbers from the spending analysis. This is my monthly budget overview for November. If you've been following me for the first part of this month, then you've already seen a few videos where this has been featured in it, because I'm updating this every week. So if you're interested to see how I do with the rest of November, then please subscribe and come on back, and I'll show you all the numbers, and I'd love to have you here. So I've been filling in this budget each week with what I've actually been spending, what's actually come in, what's actually gone out. I just did the video for the second week of November, so that's up, and I'll link to it either down below or at the end of the video. But in terms of how I arrived at these numbers, this was based on looking back over 6 months and saying, okay, what are things that always come out? Things that I know that I need to pay every single month that are going to hit my account at some point. And I listed all of those here. And I did them in order of date from the first through the end of the month. And then I started over at the start of the month with anything that I knew was going to come out this month that is unique to this month. So in other words, these are things that are going to come out in November that I don't expect to see in December. So one of them is a doctor bill that I had for the recurring virus issue. So I just got the bill in October and I paid it in November. So that's here. And then an annual fee for one of my credit cards. A lot of people don't like credit cards, and believe me, I get it. And if you have credit card debt, then you should endeavor to get rid of those as soon as you can. But I can tell you that once you are free of credit card debt, you're still going to be spending money. There's money that you have to spend. And if you can find a credit card that works for you, in other words, that gives you rewards that are greater than the cost of the annual fee with what you usually spend, I'm not saying go rack up debt again or go spend money that you don't need to just to earn credit card rewards, because that's ridiculous. But if you find a credit card that gives you good rewards for the amount of money that you're going to spend anyway, then I think it's worthwhile to pay the annual fee. So I have 2 of those, and I pay the annual fee and I get way more value out of them than the cost of the annual fee. So that's all I'll say about that. But one of those annual fees is coming out this year. It is a whopper, but it's budgeted for. I have the money, and this is what I've chosen to do with it. And when it comes time to travel again for my next vacation, this $650 annual fee is probably going to deliver me around $900 worth of value toward the cost of that trip that I would otherwise have to pay out of pocket. So, how I came up with these other numbers, the income is what it is. I already went through the bills. Wallet spend, this is about what I think I can get by with on a monthly basis. So about $200 a week. I leave $100 in my bank account and I take the other $100 out in cash. I don't spend a lot of cash because, again, I'm earning rewards on the credit card, but I do spend some in cash just because it can be easier that way. So every week on Friday, I go to the ATM, I take out $100. The other $100 just stays in the bank account and I use that to repay credit cards. And then at the end of the week, I write in how much I've actually spent. Now, I'm over in both of these weeks, but I have a plan to make it up later in the month. I covered that in the previous video, and again, I'll link to that later on. Stockpiles. So right now, I don't have any stockpiles or sinking funds for this year. I will for 2025, but I got a late start, and I think, for me, my most important thing right now is to fund my 2024 Roth IRA, and I really want to get that done by the end of December. So I'm not really putting money toward any other goals. I've got a singular focus on that. The only other thing that I'm putting money toward is my emergency fund, and that comes out $200 out of every paycheck. I'm paid twice a month, and that's covered here in my bills. So the only thing that I've planned for this month is $150 toward Black Friday shopping. I do have people that I choose to exchange gifts with at Christmas time, and so I want to be able to take advantage of some sales if they're any good, and so I've got a little bit of money here set aside for that, and that came out of the second paycheck, or the first paycheck, I'm sorry. And then savings and extra debt. Again, this is $900 going to my Roth IRA. That's the priority. And that's what I worked out that I could afford this month. With all of my bills and all of my weekly spend, there were 5 Fridays in November, so that hurt me because I had to take out another $200, where normally I take out $800. This month I have to take $1,000 to pay discretionary expenses. So that's what it worked out to what I could put toward my Roth IRA this month. And so that gives me, a total that I can live with. So far, I'm doing pretty good staying within the budget. The expenses that I planned for have come in either right on, or I had one that was a penny off. But so far, this part of it is on plan. This part I'm a little bit behind, but again, I have a plan to come back to it. And I got here from doing that spending analysis and cutting out all of the unnecessary things. And now that I'm tracking my spending, which is the next thing that I'll talk about, I'm doing much better at not letting any of these unexpected expenses just come up, where instead of thinking, okay, do I really need this? Is there another way that I can pay for this or not spend this money? I just swipe the card. So now that I'm tracking my expenses, I'm less prone to that, and that's what I'll show you next. So here's my expense tracker. This is anything that I'm putting onto a credit card that isn't a bill, in other words, not accounted for in the bills section of the monthly budget, that I will need to take money out of my discretionary spending allowance to repay each week. So it's current through the 13th. I did have one more transaction come through this weekend that I haven't recorded yet, but it's in the small tracker that I keep with me so that there's not anything that I forget to write down. I only write down transactions that I put on a credit card. I don't count my cash transactions. As far as I'm concerned, the cash is a sunk cost. And if there's any left at the end of the week, I use that to offset my credit card purchases if they go over. So that's really the third part of budgeting, is making sure that once you set a budget that you track and then you adjust. Because once you set a budget, it's not a fixed exercise. It requires tweaks. It needs to be flexible. It needs to be elastic. And so it may be that as prices continue to go up and up, I need to go back and revise how much money I'm giving myself each week. For now, I'm really trying to stay into the $200, and tracking my expenses is the way to do that. So step 1, spending analysis. Step 2, make a budget that you can work with based on the output of your spending analysis. And then step 3, track it to make sure that you're staying on target. Or if you're veering off course, you know that you're veering off course and you can make adjustments to your budget. I want to thank you for spending some time with me today, and a special thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, subscribe if you're new, leave a comment down below, and share with your friends. If you're interested in any of the Ready Budget Go products that I showed in today's video, like these worksheets, a link to my Etsy shop is down in the description. Until I see you again next time, take care.